Welcome everybody to my channel. This is Mon, and in this video we're gonna dive into how to properly build the Brahminy sniper. So let's get right into it and begin with the weapon features. So 60% chance to trigger bounce on hit and 35% bounce damage against players. Alright, pretty simple, but what is bounce? Bounce is a special ammo effect that bounces to any random enemy within 15 meters radius of the enemy you shot. Then it'll bounce once more. Each bounce damage deals equal to 40% of your weapon's attack damage. If no targets, it'll simply bounce off the environment. Then bounce bullets can crit, strike weak spots, and will have damage fall off. Alright, so then bounces plus 2 for this weapon. So with this weapon, each time you trigger bounce, that bounce bullet will bounce 4 times by default. Then, hitting the environment with your main bullet can also trigger bounce, but damage decreases by 30% and decreases by 95% against players. Then lastly, bounce weak spot priority plus 100%. Now this can be misleading if you've never used this gun before, but it doesn't mean that all bounce bullets will always hit weak spots. It just means it'll try to hit weak spots more often. So off of that, we know that this weapon should be a weak spot oriented gun. Moving on to the calibration, ideally go for frugal style so that if you do miss a shot, the shot isn't wasted and the next one gains some bonus attack percent. Now this gun does not benefit from rapid shot style's bolt pulling speed, so I wouldn't recommend you going for it since you'd only benefit from the reload speed, right? This gun does not have a bolt. Plus, you'd be wasting a calibration you could use for the bingo. So essentially try to go for frugal style, and if you don't have that, just pick anything else but rapid shot style. That has a high weak spot damage percent substats, since the calibration substats you're going to want to go for would be 2 times weak spot damage bonus. Moving on to accessories, there is the range setup, which would be the integrated suppressor or the stealthy suppressor, along with the precision optic, any tactics of your choice, and the tactical sniper mag. This setup is more so that you don't lose as much damage from damage fall off, but you can also run the accuracy setup with the large break, any optic of your choice, the tactical laser sight, and the amended mag. Although you will lose some reload speed and some mobility if you use the amended sniper mag, so I'll still be going with the tactical sniper mag. Moving on to Cradle, you're going to want to run anti-phase for the sniper damage bonus and the damage bonus versus phase anomalies. Tactical combo for the 25% weapon damage bonus, deviation master for the bonus damage versus great ones and elites, deadly combo for the 25% bounce damage bonus, then steady hands for the extra weak spot damage bonus versus marked enemies or when you're in fortress warfare state. Of course, you'd want bounce rampage for the stacking bounce damage bonus, fortress link to buff your fortress warfare, and lastly bounty hunter for the stacking weapon damage bonus. Of course, if you don't use a fortress warfare weapon such as the long axe, feel free to use any other cradle buff, be it defensive or whatever. So for instance, you could go with deviant energy defense for better survivability. Moving on to key gear, let's explore the different key gears first. So first off, with the hot dog shorts, its effect is bounces plus 2. Which means that per bounced effect triggered, that bounce bullet will be able to bounce an extra 2 times as shown in the clip here. So for instance, the bounce effect has 2 bounces guaranteed, then the Brahminy's weapon features adds another 2 bounces, so if you have the hot dog shorts equipped, triggering a bounce bullet will make that bullet bounce 6 times. Then, let's talk about the tattoo pants. The effect of the tattoo pants are that bounce can now hit allies but deal no damage with a 70% chance to automatically refill 1 bullet. So this is only really useful when there aren't enemies grouped up near your target, since you won't lose the damage that you'd have lost if the bounce bullet just bounced to an enemy, right? So with this mod, the bounce bullet can bounce to say a portable turret you've placed or you, etc. But really, it's not gonna provide any additional damage bonus. It's more of a like no need to reload key gear option. So the ammo refill part isn't that bad, since it's going to try to refill your mag at a 70% rate each time the bounce bullet hits an ally, not every time you trigger a bounce bullet. Then finally, for the Sharp Blade Pants, its effect is bounce trigger count +1. Here, the short description can be kind of confusing, but really it functions the same way the Shrapnel Cage Helmet functions, which means that what it really does is that it doubles the amount of bounces the weapon has. So for instance here, bounce keyword itself has 2 guaranteed bounces, then the Brahminy adds 2 bounces from its weapon features. So when you have the Sharp Blade Pants equipped, triggering a bounce bullet will make that bullet bounce a total of 8 times. So looking at all of these options, it's pretty clear that Sharp Blade Pants should be the preferred key gear, as it'll allow this weapon's bounce bullet bounce 8 times instead of 6, which gives the most amount of damage potential. Moving on to the secondary weapon and melee options. As the secondary weapons, you have the choice between Bingo and Wildfire, both being good supportive options. The Bingo has a low magazine capacity, but it can give up to 45% weak spot damage bonus and give up to 15% attack, whereas the Wildfire can only give up to 25% weapon damage bonus, but has a much bigger magazine capacity, so a lot of times it'll come down to your own preference and to which stat you need the most. Then for the melee weapon, run the Long Axe for the Fortress Warfare buff, or really any other melee weapon with medium or average attack speed with a light striker style Cali if you want more movement with the jump attack tech. Moving on to substats priority, let's start with the gun and mask, which are the only 2 slots where you can equip bounce suffix mods. And so for the gun and mask, ideally you're running a bounce suffix mod, as you're likely to have way more weak spot damage bonus than a bounce damage bonus. And well, here bounce damage bonus is compared to weak spot damage bonus, since they're both the fixed substats. And so ideally go with a bounce suffix mods, and for the linked substat, go for bounce weak spot damage %. Bounce trigger chance isn't that good, since it's going to be, again, it's going to be a 12% total from the bounce suffixes. So you have 2 bounce suffix mods that you can get, 6% on each, so 12%, and that 12% is multiplicative with the weapon's base trigger chance, and well, 12% times 60% is a 7% increase, so it really doesn't matter that much. Then as linked substat, as general substats, go for 2 damage bonuses versus X type of enemy, depending on the type of enemy that you are clearing. Then for everything else, go with precision suffix, with weapon damage bonus as linked substat, and 2 damage bonuses versus X type of enemy depending on the, well, content that you are clearing. Now for the mods, let's start with the gun. So we have Bounce Rampage. Its description is the more selectable targets bounce has, the higher the bounce damage, up to 45%, and scales with 15% per target. Now this gun can only have up to 1 selectable bounce target, so you'd only gain 15% bounce damage bonus from this mod. Then we've got Boomerang Bullet. So each time bounce is triggered, its trigger chance plus 2% based on the weapon's base trigger chance, lasting for 5 seconds and stacking up to 10 times. So if you equip this mod, when fully stacked, the weapon will gain 12% extra bounce trigger chance, which isn't that valuable considering it's also going to take some time to ramp it up, as this weapon only has 60% chance of triggering a bounce. Then we've got Super Bullet, which is bounce crit rate plus 10% and bounce crit damage plus 25%. Now this gun isn't a crit oriented weapon, so we're just not going to use that. Then finally, we've got Multi-Bounce. So the more bounces, the higher the damage, up to 45%, 7.5% per bounce. Now this considers a bounce keyword effect, which adds an additional 2 bounces by default. So with this weapon, you'd be sitting at 30% bounce damage bonus if you equip this mod, since the gun also features 2 extra bounces by default, right? So 4 times 7.5, that's 30%. And since we're running Sharp Blade Pants, Sharp Blade Pants is bounce trigger count plus 1, it's not gonna count towards the more bounces counter from this multi-bounce mod. Which, all in all, TLDR, the preferred mod to run would be multi-bounce. Now for the Bullseye Weapons mod, you're gonna ideally run Vulnerability Amplifier so that the enemy gets an extra 8% vulnerability to damage. However, you can always consider this mod called Spreading Marks, so when a marked enemy is defeated, the bullseye will spread to one enemy within 15 meters. And this kind of complements bounce a bit, since if bounce kills an enemy, well, the bullseye mark will spread so that potentially the next bounce hits that enemy, or all of the next bounces. Now for the helmet mod, Precise Strike is the best option. It's easily gotten 36% weak spot damage bonus is massive, albeit if you don't have a good one, you can always consider Momentum Up. Just know that at equal substats, Momentum Up won't do better than Precise Strike. Moving on to Mask, you've got Break Bounce, and you've also got Precision Bounce, if I can only find it in all of my mods. So yeah, you've got Precision Bounce here. Now, Break Bounce's description says that when a bullet hits an enemy above 50% HP, the bullet's final damage plus 25%. Now, really what this does is that it's only applied to your bounce bullets. So when a bounce bullet hits an enemy above 50% HP, the bounce bullet gains a final damage multiplier of 25%. Then, Precision Bounce makes it so that the 6th time you trigger bounce, the supposedly next bounce bullet will have an extra bounce damage bonus on all of its target's hits. However, it's not exactly that, it's more that it's on the 6th time you trigger bounce, that bounce bullet will gain the extra bounce damage bonus. And with Sharp Blade Pants equipped, that 6 counter is effectively reduced to 3, so on every 3rd time you trigger bounce, that bounce bullet will gain the extra damage buff. However, Precision Bounce is kind of bugged right now, or just straight up broken, since it literally just gives a different bounce multiplier of 125% instead of 50%. So if I can showcase it right here, so here I have no cradles equipped, I have the Sharp Blade Pants to help me showcase that it has Precision Bounce's counter by half, and so I have a Precision Bounce mod equipped with 3.6% bounce damage bonus. I also have Multi-Bounce equipped, which would give me 30% bounce damage bonus from its core effect and 2.4% bounce damage bonus from its substat. So from my stat sheet, I will have essentially only the 3.6% bounce damage bonus to worry about if I only focus on the bounces that hit an enemy on a non-weak spot. I don't know why I struggled to say that. Anyway, another thing I should mention is that since the Brahminy is a penetration gun, I have to do a 0.95 multiplier on the normal bullet damage, but for the bounce bullets, I don't need to do that. So here, if I just trigger bounce, I'm doing 1400 damage, I trigger it again. This is the 3rd time, so 3151, 3151 damage. So we do that again, 1400, I should do 1400 again, and this time I do 3151 damage. So I started the clip with on the counter already being on 2. But essentially, yeah. So 3151 damage divided by 1400, that's going to give you 2.25, which is equal to 125% damage bonus, which here in this case would be a different damage multiplier from the mods and from the Cradle's bounce damage bonus. Hence, Precision Bounce doesn't actually give you 50% bounce damage bonus, the buff is 125%. Which means you should just use Precision Bounce over Break Bounce, since Precision Bounce also gives a final damage multiplier, and it's much stronger at 125% bonus. Moving on to gloves, your 2 options are going to be Weak Spot Damage Boost and Munitions Amplifier. And here I'd recommend Munitions Amplifier over Weak Spot Damage Boost, as most of the time you'll have way too much Weak Spot Damage bonus compared to Weapon Damage bonus, so you're getting diminished return by getting more Weak Spot Damage bonus, and in any case, some of your bounced bullets won't hit weak spots either. So just go with Munitions Amplifier preferably. Moving on to the shoe mod, go with Covered Advanced, as it's either less conditional or it gives more buffs than all the other options. Of course, oh, I can't see anything. Of course, feel free to use a Ruthless Reaper to avoid the need of reloading when clearing easier content such as POIs and stuff and whatnot. Moving on to the top mod, it's pretty much the same thought process as we did with the gloves, so your two options are going to be munitions amplifier and weak spot damage boost, with the munitions amplifier being preferred. Of course, feel free to use a legendary mod for its defensive bonuses if you struggle to survive. Lastly, for the pants mod, preferably you're running 3 strikes for the 150% total weak spot damage bonus that you can gain from it. However, don't run Bullet Siphon for the weapon damage bonus since you won't have enough bullets in your magazine to max that effect out. And even if you do, say you run Tattoo Pants, which you're already losing damage, well, it's gonna take quite a while to max this one out. And another option could be Unstoppable, so weak spot damage plus 20% when a bullet hits a target for more than 20 meters away. And then for every additional 1 meter away from the target, weak spot damage plus 1%, up to 20%. I'm not really a fan of this mod since it kind of like forces you to be far away from your opponent for it to take effect. And if you're staying far away, well, you're losing damage from damage fall off. So I wouldn't really go for this mod. Moving on to food buffs. For the food slot, you're going to want to run the mixed fried hot dog for the damage bonus versus marked enemies. If you don't have that or just can't use that, then eat the bone and deviated sausage for the extra damage versus bosses. And if not, feel free to eat stuff like crumbly bread. Of course, there's also the other weaker options, but I won't name them. Moving on to the drink slot, there currently isn't any drink buffs that buffs this weapon's damage, so feel free to use Stardust Raspberry Shaved Ice to increase your bullseye duration, or just use any movement drink buffs you want. My preferred one would be the iced tea.